Okay, we're all set up, I think. Um, okay. Yeah. Where did we left off? So we left off where we could move a player. That's a good start. Um, of course we don't have a lot yet, but let's create a multiplayer. Um, so a new project. It's a JavaScript node. It will be TypeScript, by the way. Next. Okay, and we call it Battle Tanks Server. No. So first things first, we will add TypeScript and Socket.io and the types for everything. So we will start with npm install dash save def TypeScript. Types of socket.io. Install those things. Come on. And then of course we need to install the socket.io dependency. And I will copy over a tsconfig I always use, so that it's the same. And of course we want to be able to run our server, so we say we compile our TypeScript and then we say node dist index.js. And of course we need to do dist slash battle tank server. Then we need to create a new directory called source, and this we will mark as the root. And then we can create a TypeScript file index. That's the first part. So we will create a HTTP server. From the HTTP, I can type at the moment. Boom. Okay. Of course, we want socket.io equals new server. It's not in there, so we will say import server from socket.io. Of course, we need to type it right. And then we can see that we need a server and some options. So I pass it HTTP server and I make it empty. And then we can say HTTP server dot listen. And it's on port 8080. And we say console.log server is now running on 8080. So we already have a server. After that we say io.on and we say connection and we have a socket. From socket io boom, and then we can say handle events. For example, we will have a socket on player moved, and then we will need to handle the player moved. We will create another object for that one, but we will first create a player model for our server. So we'll go model player. Okay. And this will be just an interface called player ID string, and the X is a number and the Y is also a number. So the ID here is the socket ID from socket.io. Now we create a function to create a player. X is a number and Y is a number, and it of course returns player. And then we say return ID X Y. Done. The next thing is we need to handle some state, so we'll create a new class called player state. And I did it wrong. It's players state, so it's all the players that are currently connected to the server. So export class player state. We will keep a list of players, and it's an array. And then we have some helper methods. So we say public player connected. That's the first one, and we give it a socket from socket.io, of course, and it's void. So first we will say console.log player connected, and we will log the ID as well. So on socket you can see that it has an ID, and the socket ID is just a string, by the way. It's a bit defined weirdly, but okay. After that, so the player is connected, we want to emit some stuff back. So we say socket.emit my socket ID. So the game also knows the socket ID of this session. And it will basically be just ID socket.id. Nothing more. We will also want to emit a new event, get players. So all the current players that are already connected, and we say this dot players. So this should also be plural. So if we connect, we get also the other players that are already connected. And then, because the other players also need to add this one, we say we broadcast an event called new player. Rather simple, and we say then the socket.id. So you see the key here is that socket ID. Yeah. And after that we say this dot players dot push, and then we say create player with the socket.id, and we both say 00. When we spawn a player, we can send the player moved, which broadcasts it back then. So let's implement that one. So these are all handler functions. So public player moved. We again have the socket, and we have data, which is any, which is JSON object. Get back. And it's small to do. We need to define a data object so we can use it better and get compiler. So in the beginning we say data.id is the socket.id. So we need to set it still. Then we say socket.broadcast emit, and we say player has moved. And we just emit the data back. So when we come into our server, we get the data, basically the X and Y where the player has moved. We add the socket ID because that's our differentiator at the client side as well, and we send it back. But of course you want to keep as well the data in our server where the players are. So we say the player index, we'll call it p index, this dot players dot find index, and then p dot id equals data dot id, and then we can say this players p index dot x equals data dot x, and the same for y of course. And this makes sure that it's as well connected and kept track of in the server, so we can do more checks on it if we need to. After that we say we have an event if the player disconnects. So player disconnected, as well passing the socket. It's a void as well. So we say socket dot broadcast dot emit, and it's a player disconnected event, and we send the ID of course. Socket ID. And we say this all players equals this players filter. And we see player ID not equals the socket ID. So we remove the players, the current player from our array. And then of course a bit the same as that log statement, we say that the player is disconnected. Our server is almost done at the moment. Quite fast, I might add. So here, when we have a connection, we start. Okay, of course we need to create our player state. So const players state equals new player state. Okay, and here we say player state dot player connect, and we send it socket. So that will create a player and emit it to everyone else, and then we will handle the events. So we have a player moved, so we say player state dot player moved. We send the socket and the data, and of course we have a disconnect, which is a socket IO event that's already in there. We don't have any data. We said player disconnected, and we only need the socket. Yes. And that handles it at the moment. So, of course, we need to run our server. We have a start here. Now, okay. Maybe first check what the errors are. I already have a server running. So you see we have a server running. So now we can implement it into our game. I already did a tutorial on it, and that's the only thing I did, so I will implement it that way, and then we'll see where we need to fix, extend, and change stuff. We're going to start with another handler. Socket client handler, and every game screen will have one. And I just see that we can't even take over what I already did, because it's completely different build through the tutorial. Nice, a whole experience. So we of course need a socket, so we say private socket. Socket, not from net, and we need to implement another library as well. So yeah. So we will go to our dependencies, nope. In this build, involve the core, another dependency. We add the socket IO client, version 2.0, and it's not really great. It works a bit abstract, and I really don't like it, but okay, we'll have to deal with it. So we'll have a constructor. And I will also create a new class, socket event. Yeah. So we have a few events we already have, but we also have some new ones. So we say public static final string my socket ID event, my socket ID, new player event, new player, player, this it. Okay, we have a get players event, and we have a player moved event. Okay, so now we can reference just these, and if our event change, we just do it here, and it's a bit cleaner. In the constructor, we will call a connect and configure, which we need to create. Yeah, and that's a pity that it's not a resource that we can just auto close it. You need to handle it yourself. So we'll catch an exception E, and at the moment we just print the stack trace. We need to handle it correctly. I will add it to do at the top of the class. Error handling. For a moment we just will print the stack trace. We need to inform the user that the server is broken or some sort. I don't know yet. Socket equals io dot socket, and we have a URI. Yeah. Put it on top private static final string server URL, and at the moment it's rather simple. We need to make it configurable probably. Again, it's just the beginning of the game, so that's problems that we fix when we're ready to release. So that solves the error. Now we need to say dot connect, sorry, and that gives a socket as well. So I guess I can just do this. Probably. This dot open, what open just returns this, so yeah, we just want the socket like that. That's okay. And now we say configure socket. No. Of course we want to finally if the socket is not null and the socket is connected, we say socket dot disconnected, just to clean up our mess when something goes wrong. We have a void to configure our socket. So in our configure, we will need to listen to events and handle them accordingly. I did not find any good way to do it at the moment, but I hope we can improve it later on. First we check if our socket is null. We say gdx dot error with tag. We should not come into here if it's null, so not connected yet to the socket. And we return at that point, and then we say socket dot on Now we have socket.connect event, which gives args, and we can say up.log. We set the tag, and then we say so we made a connection and we're waiting on an event, and then we can chain the event. So we have socket events created, and then we say my socket event, socket ID event. Create that method. So now we need to put in now we need to handle the event. So we first want our data. So it's in the first thing. We can do it. I'm really not a fan of the org.json, but okay. JSON object. We'll probably be refactoring this a lot, but for now we just want to have it work. And this is basically how every event will be. Yeah. So we want the ID, so we say data dot get string ID. And now we need to have the player and the tanks. So I will in here create a handler, tank handler. Yeah, that's also a good thing. And we want I can make it final, but the other ones we can't. So we want our player and we want our tank handler. And we'll add them to the construction. So we say tank handler tank. Now we say this player equals player, and of course first tank handler is tank handler. I will also already create an intermediate object called tank, which extends from entity. So we need to implement some methods, and we need to check what we did in our player. Because this, only this not. All the rest we can just do in the other constructor. So we will say the camera not. This we do. So this goes into our tank constructor, so public tank. Of course, a void. For now, we just take it over from player tank. What did we do in here? We have a spawn position, and that's it. So we take it over and remove this tank and set spawn. Nice. So in here we want a bit of a random thing. So let's say that you just have a random color. Or we should put a name on it and stuff, but okay, we're not there yet. But we have multiple tank bodies. So if we go look in our atlas, we can check. We have a lot of tank body. We have blue. Let's go to the first one. So we will, at the moment, create an array. And we say, then we go over every tank we have. So we have blue. So we have blue. What else do we have? Dark. Dark. Eventually we could make the player choose add more. That's something we can do later on. Now we just want a bit of a random thing. Green. Do we have another color? I think really huge. Red outline. We have red and sand. Okay, so we have red. We have sand. Done. Let me real quickly Google how to select some random from an array. Pa-pa-pum. Yes. So we will have not final, random. Let's just see. Here we call super, and here we say random equals new random. And in between this, we have a small piece of code. So we have tank bodies, and then we say random.nextInt tank bodies dot length. Because the last one is not included, we can just use this one, and we will have a random tank body for every player that connects, and even for the player that is connecting. Of course, then our player needs to extend from tank. And at the moment, and it's an issue. By the way, we need to do. We don't need to do this. This can go in here. So in our tank we need to do the update, and player tank will override because we want to input. This needs to come from the server thingy. But now we have a basic tank to show and to use in our tank handler. So in tank handler, and of course, oh, that's a big one. It's a real big one. Maybe we should make it as well protected, and in here protected string ID. So we have our socket ID as well in our entity, just to keep it safe, basically, and to have it. So we have now our class. So we have a private final map, not mod, but map. It's a string which will represent the ID and our tank, but not our player tank, and we say tanks. We need to initialize this one, of course. We say tanks equals new mesh map. That's it. So we want to be able in our handler to add a tank, so we say public void add tank. We need the ID, and at that point we say tanks dot put ID, and we say new tank, and we need to pass the ID. And the rest will be handled by the constructor there. And I'm even thinking further, and we as well want an override method for when we get the position. So we say vector to position, and in here we want to create the tank first, so we say how will we tackle it with another constructor or not? No, we just set the position. It's the set spawn. It's like this, and then in here we can just say vector2.0. So we will create a tank, so we say for tank, new tank with ID. Now we say set spawn, which is that position. Yeah, we just set the current in the next position at that point, and then the next cycle it will pick it up, and then we say tank. Set tank position by ID, so we give it an ID again. It's basically a repo every time, and we have vector2 position. If we type it correctly, we have no ugly lines. Then we check tanks contains key ID, so if it doesn't contain it, we return. Otherwise, we say tank.get with the ID. We set the need to update the position. I will create a public method in the entity for that one. So mostly we work with the calculate next, like here we update the movement. We set the next position to the current. We will just do this. Yeah. With a public method, we should say set position. Basically, it's a spawn. It's the spawn thing. We want it. We'll move this to entity. We'll create another public method. We say update the bounding box and update the next bounding box as well. And I'm rethinking my strategy of the next position. I only need it in the player tank, but for now it's okay. We just call it position. So we update the bounding box, so we set next, which is correct. Of course, our tank is broken again. We can just say set position, and of course in our tank handler we say set position, done and done. Then here as well we say set position. And another great thing that our tank handler needs to do, and we create our tank handler on the main game screen, is draw every tank. So we say draw. We'll as well create an update one to be safe. Float delta. This we say tanks dot get values dot for each. We have a tank dot update delta. Yes. And in this method can be final, and it's better that it's final. And this one as well. We say draw, and we send it the batch. It's not more than that. Easy enough. So now our class is ready to be used in our client handler. So we have a player and every other tank that are in the game at the moment. So we need to set the we have an ID. So the tank expects it. This gives a problem for the player tank. So it expects as well an ID, but we don't have any yet. How will we solve this one? Now we create a player at startup, but of course, yeah. Can just pass it null. And create a getter and setter for it. And then we can set the ID as well. It's a bit abstract, but we'll find a better way soon. And let's log it. It's gdx.app log with a tag my player ID, and we log the ID, of course. Okay, so that's the first event handled. We have socket events. Let's say we handle the new player event. So this new player. Let's add the rest as well. So we have a player disconnected, and player disconnected. What else do we have? We have get players. Get players. And we have the player moved, of course. Let's implement those. I can always extend our list. Handle new player, which has an object. Let's just create everything already so we don't have any compile issues. I need to do it 2 more times. Okay, 2. And the last one. Boosh. So what will we do? We'll take this one as a base. So we have a new player, and then we say tank handler dot add tank, and we send the ID. Easy enough. Player disconnected. So we need the ID again, and then we say tank handler dot remove by ID. Let's just call it remove tank, and we pass the ID, and we don't have this method yet. So put it below the add, and we just say tank.remove with the ID. Easy enough. So this one is a bit more tricky, but still quite easy to do. But we need old for loop for it. So we say we have an I, it's 0, I is smaller than this needs to be a JSON array. So data dot length I plus plus, and now we will loop over it, and we won't log anything. It's not that important. So we say for player data equals data I dot nope dot data dot get JSON object I. We have that one, and to get the ID we have player data, and we will create two more, x and y, which we will cast to a float. Bear with me, why? LibGDX likes to use floats. So here you can see we get an int or a double or a long, but no float. So we get a double with x, get a double of y, and we cast it to a float. Now we need to create our. So we need to say add tank handler dot add tank with the ID and a new vector x y. Done. Nice. But in this list we could get ourselves back, depends on how the events will be handled. So what we need to do is in tanks dot remove player ID. In the hopes that the player ID is already set, but if it's null, then yeah, it will be. Yeah, maybe it will give null pointers. Well, if we get a null pointer, we'll fix it. And then the last one is when a player is moved. Now the dev, this is IntelliJ. We'll take over again this small bit. It's always a bit the same, but now we'll as well want this. So we make this our data. So we have a player moved, and we have a position. We have our x and y, and then we say tank handler dot set tank position by ID. We pass it ID and a new vector of x and y. This handles the errors that are coming in, but of course we also want to send an error to our server. We'll use a public one for that. Public void emit event. So we want a string and the event, and we want an object vargars with args, and it's not more than emit the event over the socket. Done and done. Now we need to, of course, create the tank handler as well. Tank handler, and a socket client handler. and its dependencies. And we will as well create an update method. Then this can let's check. No, I'll keep it in main game screen. So we need to call tag handler.update delta as well, and of course tag draw with the sprite batch. Yeah, okay. I know what we need to do. So yeah, we will create an update in our socket handler. So we pass it to delta. So first of all, we want a private static final float. Update. So we say we want it every second 60 times. So it's every frame at the moment. We can lower this to 30 if we want. Yeah, depends on how good server it can handle. We can play around with it if it's easily configured. And then of course you want private float timer. And we just say that it's 0. Here delta our timer, sorry, plus equals delta if the player has moved and timer is greater or equal to the time update time. Now we say now we want to emit an event to update the position. So we say here for data equals we need to have a try catch again, stupid exception. I really need to make a JSON service for this because it uses the org.json stuff and it's not really well written in my point of view. We have for data equals new JSON object. Now we say data dot put x get current position do it like this, so we only need to call the getter once. And I will create in the entity a getter for it. Okay, done. So player position dot x is x and y. So a minimum amount of data will be sent to the server. Then we have has moved. Um, it's a difficult one. Let's see how we can. It's only for the player tank. So we have public bull. I will really explicitly say what it does. Oh, private vector previous server position. If current position equals not equals, sorry, and we make it the parameter because it can be null. Uh, yeah. Um, we can tackle this if we override a method, which is nice and will work if we override the term set position. No, wait, let me think. No, we will just put it like this because we update the current position with our keyboard, but every time we send it to the server we need to set it. So here we then say emit socket events dot player moved. We send it the data and then we say player dot set previous server position. So after that we set the previous server position so we can check if it's moved or not. And if we have done it correctly, we should be able to play with two windows. Fingers crossed. So we spawn that point, which is not that bad. We put it like this. As we can see, we have a player ID and a connection was made. And in the server, we also have a player connected, which is nice. Let's see if we can launch another one. Boom! Okay, there are some issues. As you can see here, it's still in the corner on this one and it doesn't move with us. And the colors are not correct. But that's something because we don't send the color to the server. That's the only thing. It doesn't really matter. But it does make our lives easier. But yeah. We don't update correctly. So this will always be false, I guess. see what this does. It's debugging time. But at least we already have a connection to the server and we see the other pop-up. So we're somewhere. So it's always false. Why? Let's debug it. The thing is, we will get a lot of times into that one, but that's not needed, of course. So null and position, but we already set it once. Yeah, I'm going to and as well there is something there which should not be happening. Difficult stuff now. Dang. Of course. Force quit. So we disconnect one, but there are still open. So not all are disconnected, that's why we still saw some. That's okay. I don't see why it's connecting again. Is it always the same ID? Who is connecting on my server? I guess there are still some Java processes not correctly ended. I will end some and see what it gives. So you see I have one. I don't see why it's not disconnecting correctly. I guess it's something to do with Gradle. And again, stop it. Okay, now we have a clean server again. Yeah, weird issue. I will move my server logs to the other side. So I wanna see. We get a player moved event. Okay, so I see it's still running. That's an issue. I I really don't know why it's happening, but okay, that's what debugging is like, I guess. So in here we can say doing here we get the ID. Let's check it out. Now, let's first delete that other statement. But where did I put it? In the update. Okay, and let's run again too. Oh, it's fun finding issues. We make it a bit smaller, and we again have another. Close that one. We can see that our disconnect also works. For some reason, it doesn't stop the application when we click the close button. I will need to look it up. So if I now move this one here, this green one should move. And I only get one move event. So I don't understand. Yeah, of course. So I have my player ID and then I get a moved event, but I don't know from where. Ah, yeah, I'm not in debug mode, of course. Stop the game. Okay, so we emit a player moved, which is nice. And now we never emit it again. So something goes wrong. So isn't. Um, should we do this? So it's not constantly? I can't imagine. It's an issue that we just found, but okay. Move. Okay. Mm-hmm. Um. Can use this. It's the same. Got it. I need to copy over my vector. Dang it. Dum dum dum. As you can see, it's different now, so we will be able to do this. Okay. So we found the bug, and I get a lot of logs. What I think as well. Implement disposable. And then what we do in here, we just say dispose. Dispose. Okay. Well, and now we can say socket dispose, and I think now we will as well shut down completely. I think the socket.io thread just keeps running in the background. So we move it over here. Normally when we start up, so there should be a player already here and not in the corner. That's also a big one. And you see that it's now true. So we already solved one bug. And now if we move, we can see we have a multiplayer. Sort of. We can move here. And we can move over here. And over here. And this is fun. It's my real first multiplayer sort of game. Now it overlaps, and now we move the other one. Okay, nice. And our shutdown is not yet fixed. Yeah, I don't know. I have somewhere a system out here, so remove this one. What happens if I just call disconnect? Um, what else do we need to stop, dispose? Shouldn't be the case. Is it disposed not called in this instance? No. Ah, okay. Maybe I found it. Nope. see. Bum, bum. Boosh. Oh, just do dispose. Done. Let's see if we fixed this small bug already. Yes, but it's still running. I don't know. At least we already go to dispose. Mm. So when we are on the desktop and display, I don't see display. Dang. Yeah, I don't know why it's happening. Yeah, for now we need to do it like this, I guess. Which is a bit strange. And even then it keeps running. So I don't know anymore. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. That's the short answer. Um, so yeah, still a pretty successful small stream, 1 hour 30. Uh, we can render multiple tanks, and their positions are updated in real time, so which is not bad. Looks good, no? I think it looks good. Wow. It broke. Seriously. So I have 2 disconnects because they come in the hide. Okay. So that's a bad plan. They keep running, which is really annoying. So now it should be fixed again. Still. I have no connection. What the hell is happening? So if I boot it up, it doesn't connect to the server. No? How did we break that one? Well, everything is going south now. We shouldn't close it. Now we have a connection again. Ah, man. Try development, they said. It would be fun, they said. So as you can see, the viewport is also... Oh, dang. Scaling quite well. So we're at the edge of the screen when we are on the edge of the screen on a smaller screen, so everyone sees the same, it just scaled, which is nice. So if we go on top, we see we're on the same level on top, which is good and easier to build our game. So thanks for watching, and yeah, see you next time.